Welcome back to the Ag Creators Podcast, where we connect consumers to the farmers, innovators, and storytellers shaping the future of agriculture. Today we're joined by Chase Garner from Spraytec, and in this episode we're digging into the basics of soil fertility, why fertilizers matter, and how to explain all this in a way that makes sense to someone standing in the grocery store aisle. From soil chemistry to precision ag, Chase will break it down in a way that's practical, relatable, and eye-opening. Let's hop into it. Chase, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Yeah, so I'm Chase. I'm the Southern rep for Spraytec. So what Spraytec is for the ones that don't know. So we're a spray application technology. So we're two parts. So we're spray application technology, and then we're plant health and nutrition. So essentially what I do is I help you things that you put in the tank, chemistries you put in the tank, I help them work better. And then I help you grow really healthy, high yielding crops.
How did you get into ag?
So I took the non-traditional approach. I actually was a UPS driver for 6 years before I got back into ag. Been in ag my whole life. Grew up in Southeast Arkansas. Um, my dad actually passed away in 2019. So when he passed away, um, I was presented with the opportunity to go back to college, finish my degree, and from there I stair stepped to where I am today. Essentially, it's fast tracked, I guess is how you would say it, because being out of ag, you can be out of ag for 1 year and you can lose so much. I mean, it's every year we're progressing. Every year something else is coming to the market, and so yeah, when I got back in, I really had to I guess intake so much information and really try to learn. I've always been told I got 2 ears and one mouth. Shut up and listen. So that's essentially what I did.
Well, and with this job, you can travel, or you travel a lot more. And so you probably get to see a lot of different aspects of the ag industry.
Yeah, absolutely. My territory is pretty big. I cover Texas to the Carolinas, so you can just imagine whether it be, your traditional corn and soybeans, wheat, like where Zach's at, and the Dakotas. Down here, we have the specialty crops, and then also we got cotton, rice, peanuts. So yeah, I get to see a diverse farming um, world down here.
So,
Go ahead, Jack.
no, go ahead, Zach.
I was going to say, so when you look at how you just put it, where if you're outside of ag, especially even for just 1 year, it's really hard to know exactly all what's going on. So as generations get further and further away from the farm, there just keeps getting more disconnect from the agricultural industry. So since you were on that side not that long ago where you weren't in the ag industry, what would you tell someone that's not in the ag industry about what's going on and how farmers are trying to grow the best crop?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So, from the outside looking in, you think, oh, well, those guys are planting a seed, they're growing the seed, and they're harvesting, and there's so much more that's going into that than just, planting and harvesting. You have the fertility side that you have to know. You have to know what the plants need. You have to take care of your soils. And not only that, looking at it from the big picture, there's so much that the ag world touches that people just don't realize. Grocery stores, your mechanic shops, banks. There's so much more to just the farm that I think people don't really realize.
So we talk about like farmers are basically chemists, when they're putting out products and when they're fertilizing throughout the year. Explain to the average person who's walking this, aisle at Walmart what goes into a farmer growing a crop in terms of like chemistry and, because a lot of y'all's products are, farmers use them throughout the year.
Yeah, yeah. So we're essentially a scientist outside of the lab. Our lab is the farming world, so to speak. Um, and your crops, they need nutrients, whether it's micros or macros, and that's where we come in. We give the plants what they need at any given time, throughout the growing season, so that the farmer can maximize his yield. And then when you talk specialty crops, even specialty crops need certain nutrients, so they can get the most out of their yield too. So, I think that's the misconception that a lot of people, when they think of the soybeans, the cotton, corn, rice, any of those crops, we think, oh, we got to push it, we got to push it. But even with the produce guys, we're adding weight to produce, in that aspect too.
So what's some of the produce or specialty crops that you get to see in the South?
So a big one here in this area that I live is tomatoes. There's some really big tomato growers here, but when you get into Florida, you got sweet corn. There's a lot of tomatoes there too, but then you get in the citrus market down there. Um, and then you have cabbage, lettuce. There's a few guys that grow lettuce over here on the East Coast. There was a lot of West Coast lettuce, so to speak, but guys have started making varieties. As things progress, we're getting varieties that you can actually grow on the East Coast now. So
That's pretty cool. I don't know. You always think of specialty crops and you think, oh, it's probably grown somewhere else, but that's, right out your door, basically.
yeah, yeah, essentially, you could leave my house and be in a tomato field in about 30 minutes. So it's pretty cool. Yeah. When you talk produce, specialty crops too, it's a lot of manual labor. There's not there we don't have combines or um, big harvesters I mean, there is some, but they're really expensive. So a lot of that's manual labor in that world too.
So when you talk about soil fertility, it's just like human health. You want to make sure you have a well-balanced diet, and the healthier diet you have, the healthier you are as a person. So when you're going into the grocery store buying this produce and, oh, it's not as good a quality, I'm trying to pick out the perfect tomato in the grocery store. Well, that all stems from how good the soil fertility is. It completely translates from your soil into the crop if you have a good soil fertility plan. And when you talk about specialty crops specifically, are there any nutrients that you're targeting that growers of, maybe if you have a garden, that you should put into your crop that are very beneficial for the taste or for the quality of the specific piece of produce that they're growing?
Yeah, so, just like, you talk about soil fertility, it's just like us when we go to the doctor, we get a shot. Essentially what we're doing is we're just trying to stay healthy, and humans are a lot like plants. If we're healthy, we don't get sick. Same thing goes with a plant. If a plant's healthy, the likelihood of it getting sick or getting a disease, decreases exponentially. So, when you talk about soil and you talk about crops, crops are essentially, as far as nutrients, a lot of them are the same. When you talk soil, you got your NPK. That's across the board. And then when you start getting into, crops and really breaking down what they need, potassium's, you need a lot of K. Boron's really good, some zinc, and those three really play across the board. And you can even get molybdenum, you can get cobalt, sulfur. Um, Something that's really big in produce, and it's really big in the ag world, broad picture across the whole crop, portfolio, but it's copper. Copper is so good for plant health. And we're really starting to take notice of that too. You know, Talking fungicides, if you have a healthy plant, some guys are cutting their fungicide pass out by just having a healthy plant. Am I recommending doing that? No, but I'm just saying, keeping the plant healthy, keeping your soils healthy, some guys are able to do that.
So what changes, you've been in the ag industry for a while and you've traveled across, the country. You've kind of seen a lot of the different aspects of it. What changes, you talked earlier about coming into the ag industry, it's changed a lot. What changes, or where do you think the ag industry is going in the next 5, 10 years?
Well, we're always progressing. That's technology is a big one. We're already seeing the autonomous tractors. And not only that, we're seeing where, you can get with some of these new chemicals that's out there and fertility products, we're getting more into the plant. Um, I see that. Um, Man, that's a tough question.
I always thought, or filming across the South, I guess, as I travel in the last couple weeks, it seems like the automation is going to become more and more popular. Like when we filmed, me and Zach came down to Arkansas, and we were filming with Chase rice harvest, and then I was down there a week before and we filmed corn harvest, and we were filming some stuff with John Deere with the automation, and the combine, will slow down or speed up or change the internal settings. And I feel like that, it's saving, that operator's been in that combine for 21 days straight, 22 days straight. And so he's getting tired of it. And so I feel like that automation, sure, it's cool technology, but I feel like it's also going to help relieve some of that stress and minimize accidents, or not accidents, but just, you aren't losing as much corn, or you're saving more.
Yeah, that combine that you were in, essentially it'll tell you, it actually depicts out in front of it, it's setting the machine as you're cutting, it's staying ahead of the actual machine with the settings and stuff. And I thought that was something that was really cool with those new machines. Um, and something else that's really, you know, here in the next couple years, I don't really see, I don't know where we'll be in 10 years, but um with AI, man, AI is going to change the game in a lot of different ways. As far as like being able to read data and different things in that aspect, because who would have thought drones would be what drones are today? I mean, you know, looking back, 10 years ago, who would have thought that we would have drones out here spraying crops, and now look where we're at. And I keep waiting for the day they're going to come out with a drone that somebody's going to be riding on. But just look at that aspect. And then, we talk technology. Um, Technologies is great, and we're always going to need it, but we have to be able to read the data that we're getting from the technology. And I think with AI, that's changing the way that, you can just plug it in and essentially get the information you're needing.
Well, that's one thing that I was shocked coming. So I didn't grow up on a farm, and so like coming into all this, the technology surprised me, but the data with like Op Center and looking at all that data, it amazed me how much farmers. Because you always think of farmers being, an older guy with a pitchfork, and the technology piece might not, they might not see that or see the value in it. But there's so many farmers who are using Op Center, and there's so much data in it that they can comb through and plan for next year.
Yeah, yeah, and the biggest thing right now is like sap test, tissue test. We can tell what the plant needs at any given time, and I think that's pretty really big, really huge for the farmers being able to give the plant what he needs. Um, Down here in the South, y'all both know the heat is something terrible down here, and you know, guys are still putting out dry fertility, but they're cutting back on some of their dry fertility and then foliar feeding in season. And essentially what they're able to do is they're reallocating some of those funds that they were spending in dry fertility up front. And if they have a good crop, then they're putting it in the foliar feeding. If they don't have a good crop, then they don't have to do anything. So that's something else that's been something that's definitely changing down here. Is giving the crop what it needs, and then if the heat comes in and essentially the crop shuts down, so to speak, you don't have to dump money into it. You can pull out.
So explain sap sampling to the average person who is not in the ag industry.
Yeah, so that's something I'm still learning too. But so essentially what sap test is, that gives you a real time um nutrient reading on the plant. Um there's some AI out there right now that I know is coming down the pipeline that's going to be able to like read your SAP test and essentially write you a script for what you need for that plant. So that's something it's already here, um, essentially, but it's coming it's coming really soon. That being able to go out there and do a SAP test on your plant, and then have the data written or written you know
Real time.
real time, having real time data. I mean, there's tissue. I actually worked with a couple guys this year that had the tissue tester that they could go out there and give you real time data, in the field. Like we literally did a tissue test, did the leaves, and then had the had the nutrient levels right there on the spot. So that was something that was pretty eye opening too. We didn't have to send it to a lab.
That's pretty neat, because then you can, if the farmer's going to spray that afternoon, he can, you know, put what he needs to from that sample in the tank in the same day.
Yeah, so right now the turnaround on those are usually about 3 to 4 days. So you have to ship them, and then you send them to we send them to a university here, and essentially what happens is they have to break the leaves down and then get you your data. And it's normally 3 to 4 days, maybe five, depending on how busy the lab is. And having that machine to go out there and you can have real time nutrient levels and data that's pretty important. That's being efficient, and that's what we're trying to do here is be efficient.
It seems like farmers, as you know, time goes on, the biggest thing that they're trying to do is be more efficient. I mean, all this automation and all this stuff goes back to the same thing. It's how can we get more done in a day?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Time is money in our industry.
So, Chase, since you work with some specialty crops that go straight from the field to the table, like you talked about tomatoes, you talked about sweet corn, cotton doesn't go to the table, but a lot of people use it on a daily basis. And rice is also a crop that goes straight to the table. What is one thing, so you can take each one of these separately or a few different crops, what's one interesting thing that the normal average consumer of those products might not know? You can start with any of them and you can go one after the other, or just pick which crops. It's just super interesting to me to hear this.
Yeah. So talking cotton, I actually seen a TikTok yesterday, um, and it caught my eye because for me, growing up in the South, I've seen cotton since I was as far back as I can remember, And I seen a TikTok of a lady out in a cotton field out in Texas, and she was like, "I did not know that cotton grew on trees." And it was to me, it was funny. It was a funny video and all that, but at the same time, it was like, you know, we see cotton, and just like in your region, you see corn and soybeans. You know, we get so used to seeing it that we don't realize that other people might not know how it grows. Um, so cotton, something with cotton is, we have to essentially mow the stalks down. So with a cotton picker, we pick the lint, and then you're left with essentially the tree, as she put it. And then we come in there and we mow it down. What a lot of people don't know is that cotton, the regrowth on that is it'll start growing a new cotton plant almost immediately. Um, so we go in there and we work it up, get it ready for the next year. So with rice, we actually got to hang out in the rice field. Y'all got to see some zero grade, and that's a pretty cool. The zero grade's a pretty cool aspect. We see a lot of levee rice when you think of rice too. Um, with the flooding, and y'all talked a little bit about that on one of y'all's videos, but with the flooding, a lot of that's for weed pressure. You know, a lot of people don't know that. They think, oh, rice needs all this water. Rice does need water, but a lot of that has to do with the weed pressure too.
That's one thing I never realized so I had never seen rice until 3 years ago. And coming down there, it was like, oh, rice must need, a lot of water. And like, sure, it needs water just like corn and beans. But the main reason they flood it isn't for the rice to get water.
Yeah, yeah. It's essentially weed pressure. Um, and that's a takeaway. Matt taught me that when I got back into ag, because I was just like you, I was like, oh well, we flood rice because rice needs to be flooded, because when you see a rice pitcher, what do you see? You see a flooded field. And no, there's actually, I want to say in Georgia there was a guy growing it under a pivot. So I'd have liked to
I bet
seen
that
that.
pivot was working overtime.
I'd like to seen that, but I'm pretty sure there was a guy growing it in Georgia under a
That's
pivot.
crazy.
So yeah.
So what's one big takeaway that, when we're talking about soil fertility and farmers, basically being chemists when they're, applying these products, what's one big takeaway that you would tell, or you would hope, one of these, average grocery shopper at Walmart would hear?
So what I like to say is healthy soils equal healthy crops. That's a simple way to put it. If our soils are healthy, we have healthy crops. Um, Same goes, with getting the crop the right nutrients. We get the crop the right nutrients, and it stays healthy, then, um, we're accomplishing our goal at the end of the year.
Soil fertility is just so important, building up the soil. It also helps the future generations. So I'm hoping, and that's why my family helps build this up, because soil is a resource that cannot be added. It's going to be there, and if you degrade it, it's going to be like that for the next generation. But if you build up the soil fertility, have great crops, it's going to make the soil healthier and leave it that way for future generations, and hopefully they can make it better and better and better. The soil is the number one resource on the farm, and you just want to make sure that it's amazing. And talking about soil fertility like you do, Chase, is just awesome. So we really appreciate having you on the show.
Thank y'all for having me.
Well, Chase, we appreciate you joining us. And like I said, our goal is to teach the average person where their food comes from. And so we enjoy having farmers and industry professionals from the ag industry join us and break it down. And so you can follow us on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and be sure to like and subscribe, and be sure to follow along for our next episode.